Spiderweb.
Sorry.
Hey, Paul.
Hey, James, thanks for coming through.
Absolutely, anytime.
Rolling.
Awesome.
Hey, James, thanks for coming, man.
Thanks for having me. Yeah, this is a pleasure.
Um, so, it's fun to talk to architects about my house because I forget that it's like actually kind of prehistoric.
Yeah, coming in like immediately, I was like, wow, this is like the details, the hardware, the trim, just gorgeous, and a lot of potential. Like once you take out the floor too, I'm excited to see what it's gonna become.
Yeah, when I took off the linoleum in the kitchen, the color of the subfloor and the tight grain, man, it's just like deep dark red, and even the redwood that I exposed when I did the walls and everything, it's obviously like old growth California, Northern California.
Yeah, that's rare.
It's just so crazy.
Nice. What year was this built?
So I haven't found the permit because Ewing Street used to be called Husted, and the only permit that I found was for my little back house, which is kind of like it's almost like a shed or
Okay.
it was. Well, no, that's not true. The permit said it was not intended for habitation or living. It was just one room, and I think it was sort of like an accessory dwelling or accessory building.
Yeah. Right.
But then there were other rooms that were incorporated, and I think it might have been an outdoor porch that was later enclosed, and then another room that was dug into the hillside actually. So it's kind of a little like addition by adoption of space. But you're on the Echo Park Neighborhood Council. I'm on the Echo Park Neighborhood Council. The neighborhood council system is very interesting. It's intended to get local people to have a way to connect with the city council and the rest of the city government. How did you hear about the neighborhood council?
I just got some newsletters, I believe, from the city, and it caught my interest. There was a lot of issues and things that I was concerned about that didn't see much change or action, and figured, I've got to give it a shot, give it a go, and see, how I can contribute in whatever way.
I mean, whenever we have an architect on the neighborhood council, it's super helpful. The issues that you're thinking of, I want to later on get to specifically Sunset Boulevard and the development that we're supposed to see happening there. But we just took a little walk, and I wanted to show you a house that's really kind of, with one little house, has a destructive effect on the entire feeling of this entire street, because it's unlike all the other houses. It's been built out and up, blocking an entire view, which is just gorgeous hills with little houses that don't overwhelm the hills, so you can still feel the topography, and that's a concern because the same things happened on Echo Park, which is even more of a problem because it's a pedestrian corridor, and we all benefit from being able to walk up and down and see the hills and the houses. And
Right.
You used a word called view corridor, which I need to keep in my back pocket because we need density, we need housing, but there are ways to build that don't have as sort of destructive of an effect, obviously.
Totally agree. Yeah, I think there's a lot of beautiful views and scenery, especially in this neighborhood, worth preserving, and I think there should be some input from our neighborhood to kind of preserve that without sacrificing housing density or.
It seems like there's like a lack of sort of an ability for developers to interface with their community and try to at least figure out ways that they can develop without sacrificing units, but with a little bit of design features that can take into consideration, sensitivity to the environment.
Totally. It comes into good design. And I think any good designer will factor in those elements and preserve an important view or a feature of the landscape. So I think there's many possibilities to keep the same number of units or the same square footage without losing those precious things.
It seems like sometimes developers come in with an almost like defensive mindset, like I'm afraid that you're going to tell me that I'm going to lose profit, and so I'm right off the bat going to try and claim whatever I'm afraid I could lose, without even being open to sort of like ways that they can maybe even increase their value of what
Absolutely.
they.
I think there's values gained in other ways that are often overlooked. So
I guess it's that dynamic that often takes place where developers are resistant to input. So one other thing that I wanted to also footnote for later is, what are some of the interesting, like green building features that a lot of designers may not know that they could utilize that are potentially, environmentally conscious?
I think a lot of passive methods are something that are not really given enough attention, and this is just the way that cultures have designed to local climates thousands of years ago. And passive ventilation, just the way that you build your wall assemblies.
The double hung windows, yep.
Exactly, and I think we could reintroduce those elements that, modern design and architecture, we get reliant on mechanical systems or air conditioning,
Right.
and we cut costs in ways that don't benefit the performance of the building. So I think there's affordable ways to do that.
Right.
And often we look to solar or to things that are more expensive but good, but not everyone can afford that. So,
I'm just thinking double hung windows is a passive cooling thing that a lot of people don't even know why these upper windows can lower to get the hot air to flow out
Right.
and stuff. What are some other ones that are overlooked or kind of maybe innovations?
I think you can do.
You were mentioning walls.
Right, wall assemblies.
Assemblies, yeah.
Like masonry or stucco, I think are great. We can add more layers of insulation in new construction. We can paint the house a different color. Don't paint it black. It's
Right.
going to perform. I did a test on the project that painting black versus white increased the temperature of like 50 degrees Fahrenheit, just being in the sun. And just imagine the impacts of that in the space that you're living, just by painting it a different color.
Amazing, yeah. I just hung a shade cloth over this area where I'm trying to grow seedlings, which need a little bit of shade. And being under the shade cloth, it's just crazy how much cooler it is.
Right, and other things like just how you configure windows, or like having a stack effect with a chimney maybe could help pass air through the house, so you get that breeze.
Stack effect. How does that explain that to me? Just because I'm not familiar with that term.
Well, generally heat rises, so
Yeah.
if you have a way for air to escape through the top of your
I
home,
wonder if that's what that hole is for.
it could be. It looks like a
more of like a heater hole.
yeah,
I
it looks
think-
like a stove or something.
Yeah, so that this is a brick chimney that you can't see, but I'll show, that has two holes on either side, and I'm imagining that on the one side there was the stove, so that came out on that side, and on this side there may have been some sort of a fireplace
Right.
that would have served that way. When I first bought this house, there was still a ice box, or one of those little old refrigerators with a I think it had these like slats on the bottom where the melting ice would
Oh, that's
drain.
awesome.
Yeah, was just a metal. It's just a wooden cabinet, so that you could put an ice box on the put ice on the bottom, I guess, or I don't know. Yeah, probably. And shelves above it for the
Okay.
food. Wow, you know.
That's cool. Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you still have that, or you got rid of it? Yeah.
Yeah. Are there any kind of interesting, like, sort of innovations for like air conditioning that are hot that you hear about that are kind of like, because I'm always noticing on websites these things about, you know, like new ways that people are
Mhm.
cooling and doing things.
Yeah, and you know, as we all know, like it's getting warmer, and
Yeah.
the climate isn't as, you know, inviting as it used to be here. So I think air conditioning is gonna become a given. So I think there's efficient systems, just like a heat pump system.
Tell me
split
about a
system.
heat pump, because I have been hearing a lot about it, but I don't understand the actual mechanics of it.
It's a very efficient air conditioning system. You've got like a wall mounted fan coil that distributes the air, and outside is your heat pump, and that's what generates with the refrigerant the cool air. So and pushes out the hot air. But they've become very efficient lately, and I'm not a mechanical engineer,
Right,
so I
right.
can't really speak to the technicalities of it, but we use them quite often on new projects now. So, and California has some very stringent regulations, as we all know, and it's been able to meet that or exceed it. So,
That's encouraging. Yeah, I think I'm gonna have to do a little heat pump action myself, because I have a central heat that I was able to afford to have installed because I knew somebody who could do it for a price, and otherwise I use window air conditioning units. But I do like the way that it can just, you know, localize your cooling,
right,
and even the heating. It just bums me out that like I have to heat the whole house to, I mean, I can close the vents, but I don't know how much that actually, well, I mean, I guess if it's a tight close, it'll work, but
how often would you say you use that now, or
I don't use my heating very much.
right?
And it's got these long, you know, venting tubes in the attic. I don't know how different the efficiency is for the distance from the unit, you know. So you, I wanna talk about Sunset Boulevard in a little bit, but I'd like to know a little bit, just because, you know, we meet in our neighborhood council meetings, but we don't really have a chance to meet outside of that very often. And in fact, we're not supposed to be meeting in groups if we're going to talk about anything that we're going to be
Right.
dealing with on the neighborhood council. So other than events like the Lotus Festival, sometimes you can be on the board of governors with someone for a long time and not know anything about their work or what they bring to the job, because in talking to Raphael and Mansour and Adam, it's just so helpful to kind of know not only what they do for work, but what their interests are and what their kind of philosophies are or hopes for the neighborhood council. Maybe you
Totally.
could tell me a little bit about your architectural experience.
Sure. Yeah, I think
Where did you grow up, by the way?
I'm from North Carolina.
Oh,
I
what do you know?
kind of lived there till I was a teenager, and moved up to Connecticut and New York. So
Where in Connecticut?
Norwich.
And what were you doing there?
My parents moved around quite a bit.
Oh,
so
okay. Because I went to college in Connecticut. I'm from Boston.
okay, great. Yeah, that's we're in
Wesleyan.
Wesleyan. Okay, I know where that is. I went to Norwich Free Academy and did high school there.
That's a high school, okay.
Yeah, it was complimentary to the local residents, so it was a great education.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, my dad's still in Massachusetts now, and
Oh, wow.
I went to college at Pratt in New York City.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, after that, just 2 days after graduation, I packed my bags and moved out to China for
To China.
2 years, and it was the only place to experience like exciting architecture at the time because they were the only people, like the only country really developing,
Yeah.
and stayed there for a bit.
So you got an architecture degree from Pratt?
Yes, 5-year degree,
Oh.
architecture undergrad.
Nice.
So
That's the way to do it. So you were in it immediately. That's so cool. So many. Am I right that usually people go to grad school for architecture?
it is a common path to do something, maybe in engineering or math or science, and then go into grad school for architecture for a year or two. It seems like maybe an easier path, but the undergrad 5-year is really intense, and you look
Seems
at
like it's
everything.
almost like better to start young. In a lot of ways, I mean, there's such a loss of like parents passing down their knowledge to kids from a younger age, but that with folks who start their career major in undergrad, I think it can be great. And I interrupted you, sorry.
Oh no, I agree, and I think I wanted to be an architect since I was like 13, so
Wow.
I knew and I was focused on it. And in Connecticut at the time, they didn't have any schools other than like Yale, which I wasn't going to get into, but I think coming into it young, your mind hasn't been formed to a lot of the expected norms, or you have more creativity. I guess there's more freedom there to kind of play.
Much more of an ability to integrate it into your thinking, I guess. So dang, China, where in China did you move around a lot in China?
I was in Beijing primarily. I worked with Ma Yansong with MAD Architecture. They're doing the Lucas Museum here in Los Angeles.
Mackerel.
So I started there, and it was super exciting, but very, very intense. Just working in that culture, and that kind of burned you out a little bit. So I just came back here to the States and Los
What were
Angeles.
some of the things that you were working on there? Just out of curiosity, man. I'm fascinated with the sort of like development, kind of like overdrive that China seemed to
Right.
have been in.
And this was at the start of that. I
Wow.
think a lot of money was coming into commercial projects and retail development. So
What years would that be?
2013, give or take a couple of years. 2015, so those 2 years.
So were you just like designing like commercial spaces? Or,
Yeah, it was like office towers, some retail podium bases.
So a lot of like heavy duty, big building kind of engineering.
Yeah, there was Chaoyang Park, which is like probably a 50-story commercial building. I can't recall, but that was the bulk of my time there.
Wow.
And the process out there is totally different.
Right.
Locals obviously had no input. The neighborhoods, like the Hutongs in Beijing, were completely devastated just to place these
Just
corporate.
just kicked out.
They just plowed through a lot of the neighborhoods, and
Were there kind of interesting historical neighborhoods that were knocked out?
oh yeah, the city of Beijing is the central ring. Like within the second ring is what they call it. Is like the historical, going back probably centuries to the 1600s at least.
Jeez.
I mean earlier in some of the architecture, but the neighborhoods are just like these courtyard homes built of slate, and this beautiful gray tone in the alleyways.
I love slate.
Yeah.
My home in Boston was a townhouse, and somehow an architect who bought there was neighborhoods that were a lot of like burned down kind of what do they call that? They, you know, I don't know what the word is. There's a word that they used for a lot of the places in Chavez Ravine that were blight.
Okay.
And you'd get these places that people could buy really, really cheap and do stuff
Mhm.
that they wouldn't otherwise be able to do. So we had slate floor in our kitchen, and we'd write on it with chalk and stuff. And so I would just have this weird connection and love of slate, because some of the roofs in my neighborhood, historic downtown Boston, have these amazing slate roofs. So I have a massive piece of slate in my backyard that I use, as well as all this slate that I got from a just like a architectural salvage place. That must be a little bit hard to see in China, the historic.
Oh yeah, it was. I mean, there were portions of the neighborhoods that I would go to, and it was just rubble. You know, just bricks, and you know, homes that were 400 or 500 years old,
Jesus.
just completely gone.
So that probably informs some of your preservationist.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Even though that, you know, we don't have as much of a rich history
Yeah.
here in Los Angeles that's visible, at least. I think it's never. I mean, it's not too early to start with the things
Right.
that are.
And I think
meaningful.
it's not just because it's not as old. Like I mean, I'm from Boston, and a lot of the stuff out here feels like historical in a totally different way, like this westward expansion. You know,
Totally.
like I think this house might have been one of these houses that you could order in one of the catalogs.
It probably was. It looks like a Craftsman, maybe 1910s, or
Yeah.
it's probably like a Sears catalog home.
Yeah.
Or,
And that one, and this one, and that one are all almost exactly the same.
yeah.
And you don't see that very much, but we just took a little walk down by the house on the 1553 Ewing Street, which is a historic cultural monument now, and it's a time that when there were early movie studios being made, there were films being shot that were being used to sell this part of the country, not only to the rest of the country, but to the
Right.
rest of the world. And so in that way, it's kind of neat. And you can even still see it, like on Sunset Boulevard, some of the old houses. You can imagine, you can almost still see, like, this was a unpaved place that horse-drawn carriages were rolling, you know.
Right.
And LA has this funny history that I'm learning about, where there's sort of been this, like, we want to try the next thing, and, you know, just, you know, not value the history.
Yeah, and I think there's still a lot of history here, and what an
Yeah.
exciting time, you know, like early 1900s when the movie industry is kicking off, and
Yeah.
just to be living here and to preserve those elements too is just. I think that is what defines a lot of modern Los Angeles. Is
Yeah.
you know.
And a lot of our, like, our governmental structure was intentionally developed to imitate the horizontal structure of the landscape.
Right.
You know, like, we don't have a powerful mayor. We have city council offices that are
Right.
really where all the power is in the city.
It's so spread out. There's so many different neighborhoods and communities that should have a say and should govern themselves. So
That's what's going to be interesting for us with the planning and land use in Echo Park. And my own personal feeling is that if we're smart about encouraging the development along the transit-oriented corridor like Sunset Boulevard headed east towards downtown, there's this opportunity to actually get some density and create a neighborhood that, even though it may not be kind of like all of the other neighborhoods in Los Angeles, there could be a contained, walkable, kind of like environmentally conscious, dense development, you know?
yeah, and I would be excited to see that. I think there's a lot of underutilized or vacant or
Yeah.
blight that some of this space has a better use and a better purpose. And, you know, there's no reason why half of downtown or, you know, the surrounding areas is just parking lots or surface lots. Like, let's let's turn that into housing.
Yeah.
Let's start building some mixed use development that has a better purpose, and it'll drive the economy and, you know, bring more residents, bring more transit.
And it will be like everyone's just frustrated and overwhelmed and you know, discouraged when it comes to the housing situation. You know, not just homelessness, but the cost of like cost of renting and we could actually be doing something. We could actually be making a dent.
Yeah.
You know.
It's a very challenging, complex issue, and I think there's not a one solution that's gonna fix this.
That's the thing. Like, I mean, that's to me, that's the thing. Like, we have this bizarre opportunity where we've got something that's so close to downtown, that's on a transit-oriented community corridor, and that's empty. You know?
Yeah. It's kind of baffling. I mean, I get cost and financing is a big player, and just to see a vacant lot or something so close to downtown that could be potentially 40, 50 units of housing, I mean, that could contribute to a better situation. And I think we should start thinking about things that way instead of, I don't want more density, or I don't want to see this huge building. It's like resistant to change isn't always going to help, but I think we can help tailor the discussion to make that change beneficial to the neighborhood.
I sometimes get too narrowly focused on parking, although I think it is a big one because a lot of these developments feel the need to provide parking, which creates often these wasted space where they could have more units, and there's neighbors behind both sides of Sunset, Angelino Heights to the south, and like Everett Park and the whatever you call the next area between Everett Park and Chinatown, where people are always worried about parking. And developers think that they have to build parking, even though the laws have changed so that they don't have to. And that's that example of what we were talking about earlier, was like, can we actually figure out if people had a vibrant street life and public transportation and a proximity to downtown where they would still want to buy or rent there even if there weren't parking, or there were many fewer numbers of parking spaces with shared options, or, you know, bicycle or electric bicycle or scooter or something safer, a wheelchair maybe, but something safer that they could use and much, much smaller to do 75% of the stuff they now use cars to do. You know?
Absolutely. And I think it's kind of a chicken and the egg scenario that I hear a lot, but I think at some point we have to make sacrifices, and that means that we need to drive less, or we need to use other means of transit. I mean, I have a car. I don't use it, but maybe on the weekends, and I depend on biking or walking to do everything that I need to do. And I think it's a mindset that anyone could kind of find something that works with them. Maybe it's biking, maybe it's just driving a little bit less every day, but
there's this whole thing that not nobody, I don't want to exaggerate. We have a whole dash bus line that's pretty great for anyone who lives, I would say, north of Scott. If they want to get down to Sunset Boulevard, there's a bus that's an option people don't consider sometimes. And what I'm hoping to do is actually interview some of the bus drivers. And,
I think that'd be great. I mean,
they have electric dash buses.
Yeah, and they're quiet, they're clean. They often go by my house like every few minutes, and some of them are just empty. And it just,
a lot of them.
It bugs me because I've just like we have an infrastructure that
Yeah.
people don't utilize.
That's what I'm gonna say.
And I think there is a stigma and there's a bad, you know, impression of transit here in LA.
Well, I mean, it's funny because there are some bus lines that are chronically, you know, a little, you know, it can be gnarly
yeah,
on the bus sometimes.
it can. And
But-
there's a security issue too that I
Yeah.
think that's something that needs to be solved with the Metro Authority,
Yeah,
whether it's providing security or finding a way to stop fare evaders, or
yeah.
there could be a solution, or even more investment into it to make it cleaner and better.
Yeah, no, I'm very interested in what that solution could be, and there are so many other potential solutions that I think you know maybe they're not as compassionate as we want, but let's be able to think and talk about them, you know, because like I've had quite a few situations where there is someone sitting on the seat next to me who seems like they may have not necessarily a mental illness episode, but like a health episode. And you know, how do you screen? Because I have a friend who works at the DOT, and there's like a huge uptick in situations where buses have to be pulled off their routes because something
Yeah.
with a health episode. And that's just like, I mean, when it comes to like, you know, one bad experience like that can turn somebody off.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I don't know what the solution is there. I think there could be more support and more means to kind of help these people, but I don't. Yeah, it's an issue. Like I take the bus all the time or the train, and I've had attempted robbery for me, or people come after, you know, my wallet or my phone, and I'm a big guy, but I'm able to kind of fight back or defend myself. Not everyone can do that,
Yeah.
and it would be terrifying. It would ruin my experience, and I would never want to take the bus ever again.
Yeah.
So it's a huge issue.
And the bar bus drivers, their job has become kind of like hard to imagine unless they're paid. And I followed these guys, and they were sort of like contract negotiations. But they have trouble finding them. And during the pandemic, can you imagine being sort of in an enclosed space as part of your job with a person who could easily have COVID or any
Yeah.
other kind of thing?
They have a very difficult job, and
Yeah.
I commend them, because that's not easy to be exposed to so much, and to take the responsibility on everyone on the bus and keep it safe.
And on the other side of it, imagine if there was a sort of familiarity and a social aspect that was kind of positive and healthy. Like you can think of a bus driver being a kind of like a vital part of the community, you know,
Absolutely.
somebody that you know and can check in on, and, you know, be eyes on stuff. On the neighborhood council, are there any big projects coming up that are interesting? You know, there's a guy after I hear your answer, I want to ask you about this gentleman that I know who's got 3 affordable housing
Mhm.
developments proposed in the neighborhood. I don't know if you've seen or heard anything about him, but what's on the next few months? Do you know of anything?
I have not looked at the next. I actually missed the previous meeting, so I can't speak to the latest developments. But I know that they just approved the one on Sunset and Everett,
Yeah.
so that's moving forward. I think,
Do you know when that might start?
I believe they said the end of this year, or anticipated completion.
Wow.
I want to say 2026, but I could
That
be
thing's
wrong.
been sitting there empty for so long.
Yeah, it's a huge lot. It probably goes like 1,000 feet or so at least, but It's been derelict for years, and
The old Do It Right Center. It was such a funny place. Do you remember that place?
no,
It was like this pre-Home Depot, um, all-in-one hardware store that had like 3 separate buildings. One was like lumber, one was like I don't know, drywall or whatever. But it's a company that seems to have disappeared. My brother works at Home Depot.
okay.
But it's funny. There's not really a hardware store around here except on Glendale Boulevard, south of the 101.
Right.
That one.
Yep.
Par Paint used to be a place where you could get paint, but it's kind of a drag to have to get in a car to go to a hardware store.
Yeah.
But I wonder if there's room for improvement with spreading the word about proposed developments that are happening, so people have time to kind of like sit with what they think of as the initial proposal.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, the Do It Right Center seems like, I mean, they've been back and forth to the neighborhood council for years, because even before the pandemic they were coming,
Right.
and they have their own kind of like solutions to the problem, and the problem of parking, and their own set of spaces that they're providing. They do have retail on the ground floor and a restaurant, which is neat. What were your, do you remember what they were proposing, and if they made any changes based on what the neighborhood council?
They
Okay.
did make some changes. I can't really recall the specific numbers, but I know they had allocated a decent amount of low-income units, that some more affordable housing. And you're right, they had some tenant spaces for commercial at the base and a restaurant. So that was nice. I'd like to see more of that.
Yeah.
And if we could have those discussions earlier on in the process to kind of help guide developers in that direction, that'd be good. I wanted to see less parking, and I think they did not have a minimum. I think the state kind of took out the minimums for the situation, so but they still provided a pretty decent amount. So
Yeah, they did say they're gonna provide some cargo bikes, which is cool and new, you know.
and I know that they have like a transit counter, I think, like a display. I wanted them to include some transit improvements, like a bus shelter, so I think that's in the works too. Actually, they've been installing some on Sunset, so it's good to see.
Yeah, we actually took some videos of the guys doing that work, and talked to them. They did not disturb the plaque that was we have this weird athletic walk
The
of
athletic
fame.
walk of fame, yeah.
Jackie Robinson.
Okay.
That one's right there. So they were able to redo the sidewalk and make it more ADA compliant, less cracks and whatnot. And thankfully they did not disturb that one plaque. I'm really kind of excited to see if we could do a thing where we make some more plaques for people who are locals, especially guys who work with been very charitable in the neighborhood.
For sure.
You know, like there's a couple of guys on the Dodgers who've worked at the Dream Center a lot, you know, and I think it'd be fun to do something like
I
that.
think we should continue to develop that. I mean, it's
Yeah.
a very underlooked piece of Echo Park history too.
And the money that's going into sports and salaries is just really a phenomenon, and those guys have to either pay their taxes to the government or give some portion of that to nonprofits. I'm sure that they would love, and the Dodgers would love. Apparently the Dodgers used to be a pretty involved and inviting place for local kids. There are some folks around here who talk about having, you know, gone up and gotten like personal mentoring and coaching from some of the Dodgers, which would be kind of neat.
Yeah, that's super cool.
We're gonna have to deal with the whole gondola thing.
Yeah, don't get me started on that
I
one.
won't, because it's a real powder keg or a
Yeah.
nuclear or radioactive issue. I can't believe that there's no connection to Sunset involved, and I just wonder whether that's something that's not explicit, you know.
I think there could have been some better solutions there, but it feels more like a novelty and just a attraction than actual functional piece of, infrastructure.
Yeah.
But
Well, this is great. I hope a lot of people who have heard a little bit about the neighborhood council can sort of see that we're thinking about these things, and there's a way for us to weigh in to the city council. What's funny about neighborhood councils is that it's really like what you make it and how seriously the city council takes your recommendations or letters of support. And so in that way, it's kind of exciting that we have young people who have real connection to the neighborhood and to the issues joining, and hopefully staying, for,
absolutely.
because our next election, I believe, is in about a year or so,
Right.
a little more than a year. And there have been times when there'll be like a huge field of people running, and then obviously during the pandemic, involvement dropped off. But the whole neighborhood council system is going to be kind of under review, I think, and hopefully we can provide some resources for folks to make it an effective way to kind of engage. I want to say thank you for coming by, man.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. I could keep going, but this is always a pleasure.
Yeah, we can do more,
Absolutely.
All right, well, thanks, man. I'm here with James at my plum tree. He's going to help me reach some of the plums that I can't reach.
Yeah, these are gorgeous. They're a little hard. I don't want to pick too many, but a couple nice bright red.
Try the highest ones you can reach, because if you don't get them, somebody else will.
Birds are gonna get them.
They've already gotten a bunch. Yeah, don't feel like you have to. If it's hard, I can wait a couple more days.
Yeah, they might need a couple more days.
All right, cool, thanks.